All right, welcome back. This is Rudy Knapp and Legacy Building a Kingdom. I'm going to start off by just giving a little recap of what happened last week. We talked about the failing school system. We're going to continue again through feedback from other people that I've received, talk about the failing school system a little bit more in depth into some things that are going on. Hopefully, this is educational for some people out there that really haven't paid attention or don't know truly what's happening inside the schools and inside the system of these schools. So I'm just going to kind of put it out there. And I think when we know the problem, we identify the problem, then maybe we can find some resolutions and we can look at the positive aspect. But today is a little bit more negative. It is some truth. And I hope people take this in a way in which we're trying to benefit knowing so that we can move forward and we can help do our part in order to help this entire system and actually help our own children with their education process and with their own education going forward. So I like to start off with talking about a little recipe for success that I have come up with. That it's probably been out there. These words are used all the time, but I firmly believe in this in every aspect of my life. And I believe you can apply it to everything in your life, including the school system, including your education. And it starts with sacrifice. Everything you do in life that is worth doing to get some sort of result is going to need some sacrifice. And so we need to sacrifice in order to equal discipline and create a habit of discipline. And when we create that habit of discipline, it equals consistency and doing the same habit over and over and over and really buying into that habit. And that consistency will equal to accountability for our own actions, our own habits, our own actions that we put into place. And when we have sacrifice equaling discipline, which equals consistency, which equals accountability, we're going to find results and we're going to find what we call success. So sacrifice equals discipline, equals consistency, equals accountability, equals success. So that is the recipe. That can go with anything in life. We can use that for any part of our life. We can apply it towards our relationships. Sometimes we're going to sacrifice our own needs and our own wants for our partner's needs and wants. And that will lead to a discipline in how we act towards them and how we treat them. Are we really looking at their love languages and providing for them? Is that the discipline we're creating ourselves because we know that's what our partner needs? Are we consistently doing that? Understanding what they need and doing that over and over for them so that they can feel the way they need to feel, so that they can be happy in this relationship? Will that keep us accountable for for us being loyal to them, being in this relationship, and our role in the relationship will keep them accountable for doing their parts and receiving and also giving back? There's definitely things that we can apply this to. That's just one situation. We can apply it to sports. We can apply it to our careers. We can apply it to a lot of things in life where we talk about you are going to sacrifice. Sports, sacrifice time, right? Getting up. Let's talk about getting in shape. You're going to sacrifice time. Get up, get to the gym. We're going to create a discipline by going to the gym. We're going to do hard work in the gym. That's our discipline. And guess what? That's only going to work when we do it consistently. And you're going to have to do it every day. You're going to have to do it however many times a week. And when you do that, you're taking accountability for your own health, your own body. And guess what? You'll start seeing results. You'll see success. It does work. So that's my recipe. And I want to apply that to the school system and what we can do. So we'll talk about that later. Right now, I want to make sure as we talk about what happened last week, I want to make sure you understand that I wasn't just blaming parents. I mean, I am going to blame parents today. Just understand that there are parents that are going to be at fault and they are part of the problem, but it's an entire school system that's at fault. We call these the stakeholders of our schools. We understand that all stakeholders in a school and in a child's education are responsible for the success of a student. So when I say these words, I'm referring to these 6 things, right? These 6 stakeholders. Number 1, I call it the system. The system is the government, the politicians, the people that are providing the funding that comes to the school system. Are we getting enough funding? Are we passing on that funding? Are we doing it the right way? Are we taking the funding that we receive from taxpayers' money and we're allocating it to the people that we should be. That system passes it to the districts. The districts then, I'll go back to the system. The system could be a federal government, and it could also be your state government. So you have your federal government that gives funding. You have your state government that gives funding towards education. So when that system passes that money to the districts, based on whatever system they come up with how much each child receives, and it's given to the district takes that money and decides how to spend that money towards the children in the school with resources and provides with teachers and staff. Those districts are represented by a superintendent and the school board. And so those people are making big time decisions for your education, what resources, what curriculum to use, those kind of things. The school administrator has some say-so in the school is next, and that's the administrators, and they have the say-so in directly into their budget and how they spend some of their money. A lot of times what will happen is, well, what should we have in the classrooms? What resources do we need? They have some input on that. Also, curriculum, sometimes your school administrators get to choose between. And then you have the teachers, where the teachers represent what happens in the classroom, but also the union is part of the teachers. They're part of a union. And so that some teachers are, most teachers are, and sometimes they are part of the stakeholders of the children. They're fighting, the union's fighting for contracts for, children's rights in the schools, and how many teachers should there be in the school and be in front of the students, and how big are the class sizes, and a lot of different things that go on. And then you have the parents, who are the child's first teacher, and they're the ones that are responsible for making sure kids have their resources coming from home, their pencils and their paper and their folders, and they are responsible for getting their kids to school. That's a huge part of this, making sure they're there. And when they're not, that comes back and falls on those parents, because it's their responsibility to make sure they are there. And then you have the student, who is responsible for their own education in all aspects of their education, focusing, actually learning, applying themselves, being a good student, understanding that they have to be prepared and organized and be ready for instruction. So we talk about these stakeholders of the school because it's really, really important when we start talking about who's to blame for some of these things that we see are issues in this school system, a failing school system. I know we don't like the word blame, and everybody doesn't want to feel like it's their fault, but guess what? People are to blame. And when we start taking accountability, there's that word again, for our own selves and what we've done to contribute to the issues that are happening in the school system, we can start taking some change and making some changes to help our own children, to help the school system, to help the classroom, all those things. If we actually buy into the idea that we understand that we are part of the blame, or we actually I shouldn't say buy into it, we should say take responsibility, because realistically, it's pretty no-brainer of some of the things that are happening. So, first question I would ask is, what do students lack in school? So I was talking to a few people, getting some feedback this past week, and one of the conversations talked about, what do students lack in schools? Like what actually is happening where what do they lack? And so I did a little research on what people think, and you go through and you have your searches and you have polls, and people say everything they have to, but I will use this along with what I've heard over the many years, the 22 years of teaching. First thing that comes up is underfunding and inequality. I'm going to say that's part of the system's fault. Remember, that's the government, the funding, those things. That's the school's fault, and that's the district's fault. So those three things are a pretty big part of underfunding and inequality. Underfunding means we're not getting enough money to have enough teachers. We're not getting enough money for enough resources for the students. Inequality will refer to, some students that live in areas that are low economic are not getting the same resources as the students that are in high economic. So we could talk about that problem all day long. We can have a discussion on that. Let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about the concept of why kids in rich areas, their parents expect their kids to have more resources and have all the great resources, and they're not wrong. They pay a lot of taxes. Why shouldn't they? But does that mean that kids that grew up in poor areas, kids that grew up in areas where they don't have to pay as much in taxes, should they not get the funding? No, should they not get the resources in the classroom that the kids in the other areas do? I mean, the prime example is, look at Northside kids in Chicago versus Southside kids in Chicago. You better believe the Northside kids are getting laptops and everything handed to them. Go to Walter Payton Prep High School. It is like a college. It's amazing. And it's one of the top-notch schools. And guess what? It's one of the top-rated schools every year in the nation. One of the best in the entire United States. And guess what? that's a really, really, really nice school in a nice area. And when you go to the south side of Chicago and you're talking about Fenger High School and how it's one of the most poor performing schools in the nation, also ranked in the nation as one of the worst schools. We're going to say this because, hey, look at the environment in which this school exists. It's in a low economic, it's in a high poverty stricken, it's in a very violent area. What does that tell you? Well, there's violence in the schools as well. And we'll get into that in a minute. But one thing that we understand is inequitable education means that we're not getting the same opportunity. And so I'm not saying that anyone's right or wrong. I believe in equal education and equal opportunity. I'm a teacher, but I also understand if I pay more in taxes, then why shouldn't my kids end up having better things and more things? It's a very tough conversation. Its system is broken, and I don't believe that it is done the correct way as far as how we fund. But again, until we decide to step up and fight against those things, that's one thing. Some of you out there might say, hey, I give a lot of money in taxes, so my kids should have more. I totally agree with you. Maybe they should. Or some of you are in poor areas that might say to yourself, hey, I pay this much in taxes and my kids don't have laptops and certain things in the classroom. Well, guess what? I agree with you too. They should. They should have every ability that everybody has. So I'll say one more thing about this. My own personal kids, they get a laptop brought home every single day. During COVID, they got laptops. They were at home. They were Zoom, all these things. Guess what? During COVID, kids in south side of Chicago, they got laptops and they were brought home. And guess what? When it was time to return those, they never returned them. Majority of them. A lot of technology was lost. It was broken. It was stolen. It wasn't given back. Well, where my kids were, it was accountable. I had to pay for that if they didn't bring it back, if they broke it. Why isn't it held to the same standards for students everywhere or families everywhere? Isn't that a parent thing? Isn't that something where you're responsible for your child and their education and you should be signing off on? But in those low economic areas that poverty stricken, they're not held accountable for that. Why is that appropriate? Why aren't we held to the same standards? So we can look at this from two different ways, and that's a society problem. It's not me being against, it's just me saying, hey, we really need to make sure that you need to hold people accountable for this education. And part of that is one of the stakeholders, parents, right? Students. So let's make sure that when we're going forward that, we keep an open mind to this, but I am going to tell the truth. And the next one, real quick, lack of personalized instruction. That's a teacher problem. Sometimes they're not giving that personalized instruction based on data, and they should be. Sometimes that's a system problem that's not giving enough funding to get enough teachers. And sometimes that's a district problem where, they don't provide enough teachers for the classrooms or they're not giving the funding the proper way. So you can see there are some issues that come into play when it comes to this, from different stakeholders of the school. Focus on standardized testing. Standardized testing can be a bad thing. It could be a good thing. One thing about standardized testing is, the district wants it, the system wants it, the government wants it. Everybody wants to see results. And so one thing, when I explain standardized testing, I think it's a good thing because it tells me what my kids actually know. So my own two personal kids, I never really cared about A's and B's. I don't ever really care about your report card. I do want them to set the standards high for themselves, so they should want A's and B's and then scholarships and things like that. But realistically, if they're ending up with C's and D's and things like that, that's probably an issue for me. But the idea is they're just letters. I know what my student or my own kids know at home. And the standardized test tells us a lot about what do you actually know. Well, at the end of the year, they take an 8th grade test with all 8th graders across the entire state. And that tells me, what do you really know? Not the quiz that they got in class 4 weeks ago, not the little homework assignment that they got or whatever it is. None of that matters because kids can find ways through anything. Now we have AI that cheats for everybody. There's a whole lot of things. There's no thinking about. So when you take that standardized test, there is no way to cheat on it. It is what do you know? And it does tell you where do you stand amongst everybody else. So it's a good way to judge. But in the same sense, one thing that we have to start understanding is we test a lot. We continue to test a lot. We're testing and testing and testing, and we test in different ways. We give formative assessments where they tell us, hey, what do teachers need to know in order to look at data that they need to know now for a certain subject area, for a certain time frame, a certain curriculum. That's a good way to test too. But how many tests should we be taking? I mean, are we testing all the time? And there's a lot that can be eliminated. So standardized testing, that's one thing that we have to start understanding. I do believe that no matter how you look at this, you can see this in many different ways, but please understand this. A's and B's, kids are being passed along. Kids are getting passed to for other reasons. They're getting passed because they need to graduate, and schools need to see students graduate so that they have a high graduation rate, so that their school gets rated higher, so that they get more funding. This is a system that is set up to be in society to make you look better. How about we hold accountability, and how about we stop sacrificing the students' education and hold them to a higher standard? Because when we dummy down standards, when we lower standards, kids will only meet the lower standard you set for them. So when we do that, what you find happen is that we're passing everybody, and kids that have A's are kids that probably should have D's, and that's not always, but in some cases. And we see that happening, and what we're doing is we're setting them up for failure because they think they're doing enough. They think they're good students. They think they're supposed to, and they're actually not. They are struggling, and we're promoting them as if they're not. And so, do I believe in holding kids back? No, I say we fix the problem, but we don't dummy down the problem just to get them out to pass and move on. I mean, there's not even summer school mandatory many places anymore. There's not even homework in some districts anymore. They don't even have to do homework because they know they're never getting it back. We're adapting to the behaviors of children, and it's not acceptable. We need to set the bar. So moving on, teacher training and support. Well, that is a system problem with not enough funding. That is a district problem for not providing or enough funding. That's a school problem for not providing teacher training. Maybe it's a teacher problem for not wanting extra help. Maybe they don't want to put in the time and effort. So that's something that's to be said. Overcrowded classrooms. We have a system problem and a district problem there. So overcrowded classrooms comes back to funding and how many teachers do we have? Same thing. We put 30-something kids in a classroom like we see in many places. It is very difficult, number one, to teach that way. Number two, to get focus in the classroom. Number three, to handle behavior problems, which is one of the biggest issues that we might see, and we'll talk about that later. Lack of social emotional learning. To me, that's a problem that comes right from home. Social emotional learning, those are things that parents should be, number one, handling and dealing with. Number two, it does happen in school. So we have a school might have an issue with social emotional learning. They don't provide, or maybe they're not providing the right way. We maybe don't have social workers, things like that. That's a district, and that's a way in which we are not providing services for students and that need services. But again, parents, number one, are responsible for that. Lack of focus and attentiveness. Well, that's parents and students again. I mean, that's on the student. They are a stakeholder of this education, and they have to focus, and they have to find ways to. And if they can't, and there's a medical issue, that comes back to parents. That comes back to them providing for their kids and the needs that they need, the needs that we must, that they must address, for their children. And again, a lot of times that's a choice, and a lot of times that's a behavioral issue. And it's not an actual medical or health issue as far as not being able to focus. And sometimes it is. So those are things that have to be addressed. So saying this, this is kind of some of the things that have come up. And you notice that there are different stakeholders of the school system that are at fault. When I did a deeper dive into this through AI and through all these things, when you do some Googling, the first thing that comes up is life skills. Well, guess what? Life skills starts at home, and that's a parent thing. That's your child. They need to have those life skills, and you're the teacher. You're the first teacher. You're our parent. But the first thing that comes up is financial literacy, understanding money and banks and credit cards and all those things. Yes, that should be provided in classes in school, but realistically, that should start long before that. That should start at home. That should definitely be a parent thing. In schools, yes, it can be an issue, and we need to provide more of that. And you hear a lot of people say, well, they should be teaching you about these things. Yeah, it should be taught. High school should have things like this. Maybe junior high should have these. But realistically, parents are the ones that are responsible. Why do my kids have debit cards, and we're teaching them about how to see the value of a dollar and spending their own money and depositing and understanding that when you swipe a debit card, guess what? It's the same as taking cash out of your pocket. That's a hard skill to understand because you don't see the actual money being exchanged, but they got to learn it. Again, another one, time management and organizational skills. Again, parents, you are responsible. Make sure kids understand being on time is an important value. Being organized is an important value. Yes, we teach it in schools. Yes, it can be a school issue that has to be addressed. We have to make sure we take care of it, but that does come back to the parents. decision making and problem solving. We're teaching problem solving. That's what math is. I told you that before. So decision making, these are things that still come back to parents. These are your children, right? Yes, in schools, we're going to go through decision making and problem solving. Those are a big part of schools. Emotional intelligence and stress management. Again, parents, my child is stressed out. My child has anxiety. Guess what? I'm the one bringing them to a doctor, to a therapist, making sure they're okay. If that's the case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm the one that's coping with stress and handling that. Emotional intelligence, being able to handle that you're not going to win every time. You're not getting everything right. How you handle your behavior goes back to parenting again. Mental health issues, go to the doctor, challenges, mental health challenges. That's a parent thing as well. Yes, it is a school thing as well. But again, parents, you are the first one. Loneliness and social issues, again, go back to parents. Go back to what are you providing outside of school? This is your child. Why are schools the only ones responsible for these issues that are going on? They're not the only ones, and we shouldn't be dealing with all of those except for academic. We are, because that's how society has changed and has come across, and we want to see what's best for the child. We want the child to have the best education. So yes, we're going to have to understand social emotional, and understand that each child learns differently, but this starts at home, and a lot of it relates back to behavior. And when you have these other things that are going on, like bullying is the next one, and peer pressure, I mean, why is it right that some kids have to sit in a classroom that are being bullied and they're being under peer pressure because parents didn't check their own kids and put their kids in a situation where when they go to school, they understand rules and regulations and how to act properly? I mean, I'm sorry, but it does start at home, and I'm a parent. It starts with me. I'm one of them then. So we have to start seeing these in a way in which we are taking responsibility and accountability for our own kids. I'm sorry that we're blaming parents, because ultimately I believe the number one person to be blamed is the child, the student alone. They are the foundation for their own education. They are the one that is responsible to take ownership for their education. They have to take ownership for their behavior and how they act and focusing and being an actual good student. So before I get into what is a good student, and I tell you what are expected from when we start talking about teachers and what we want for students and what behaviors that exist, let me talk about the biggest problems in education as reported as I did some research. Number one, conflict and violence. Why are kids violent? Why are they having conflict? Where does that start? Violence and bullying. Violence again. Bullying. Where does that come from? Climate change. That's like, from my understanding, is taking yourself and putting yourself in a different situation. So from one school to another school, from one household to another household, you're moving and you're changing from where you are. So you're not in a stable environment. Number four, summer vacation becomes an issue in education. Well, yeah. I mean, you get the summers off, so that's a long time without education. So guess what? Kids forget things. Kids are not doing things over the summer. Be like my kids. They hate me. I go through, make a packet every year, a math packet, and every year they have to do a math packet all summer long. Do 1 page a day, do 2 pages a day, but I want to see it. I want to see that you put in effort and do your best on it. I'm not checking it. I'm not grading it. I don't care. I want to make sure that you're applying yourself to give your best effort. And those are skills that I put into my kids anyway. You don't do something unless you're going to do it full-heartedly with full effort. And so when they go through, it keeps their mind a little bit sharp. Sometimes we talk about getting on programs and things like that, but keep their mind moving. Number five, unpaid and underpaid and unqualified teachers. Well, that becomes an issue when you start talking about how some places in the United States, some teachers make absolutely nothing. In some places, they make a ton of money. So when we start talking about what is worth it, what isn't, I mean, yeah, people talk about teachers being babysitters and, talk about how easy this job is until they have to. I mean, just look at COVID. I'm going to be straight honest with you. It is absolutely hilarious to listen to most people. COVID hit. It was, thank God for teachers. We have our kids on Zoom. I can't believe they're teaching this. Thank God. They're great, all these things. And then, a couple months later, go back to work. God, I can't handle my kids' behavior. Now you see what teachers go through. And so then it was, you should go back to work. You're safe. You're fine. No, and again, COVID's a sensitive topic for a lot of people. Honestly, I have my own personal beliefs on it, but I will say, yeah, I mean, when people start realizing you're taking care of your own 2 kids or 3 kids or 1 kid at home, and now you multiply that times 8, and you got 25 to 30 kids in a classroom, and you have all different personalities and different needs. And yeah, have some respect for some of these teachers. I mean, I know I'm an advocate for them because I'm a teacher, but there's some bad teachers out there as well. I get it. But the idea is we are not, this is not an easy job. As much as everybody wants to say you get summers off and it's not an easy job. So when we say these are the biggest problems in education, that's an interesting concept. But I want to go back to what makes a great student. I would say this as a teacher: self-discipline. Students that can manage their time, that can avoid distractions, they can stick to deadlines and schedules. Those students, that's a concept that helps make a good student. How about curiosity and desire to learn? Explore, ask questions, seek answers. They're driven by the passion to learn. But we want students to do this so that we know that they are really looking to better themselves. That makes a great student. Responsibility. They take ownership of their learning, their studies, they're completing assignments on time, they're preparing for class when necessary, they're bringing the necessary materials, they are studying for their assessments. I mean, they are responsible. That's a trait that can be taught at home. Good communication skills. Clearly and effectively communicate their ideas and their understanding, both verbally and in writing. So when you communicate correctly, you're straight to the point, you understand, you use details. Those are things that exist, both writing and, out loud. So adaptability, students that can adjust to new situations, overcome challenges, and learn from setbacks. Critical thinking, analyze situations from multiple perspectives, evaluate information, and make informed decisions. And what about time management? That's a big one. Prioritize tasks, allocate time effectively, and avoid procrastination. Man, we all do that as adults sometimes. So if we can get students that don't, they do it right away. They're eager to do it. They put certain tasks before other tasks. I mean, really huge part, time management. And then the last one I have here is perseverance. And, oh, I'm sorry, that's not the last one I have, but perseverance is a really important one. Persist through difficult tasks. They embrace challenges. They have a positive attitude, especially with setbacks. That's an important part. What about actively participating in class? That's a big one. Asking questions, engage in discussions, important. They seek help when they need it. They understand the importance of asking for assistance and clarification to maybe directions. They take initiative. They seek out opportunities for learning. They want to learn more about a topic. They go get it. Conceptual understanding. They focus on understanding the underlying concepts, not just memorizing. Those are good students. Those things make good students, along with the concept of just focusing in class, just paying attention, not leaning in your chair, not acting a fool, not kicking other people, not talking to each other. I mean, I'm going to tell you that exists in schools. And when we start saying these things that are really keeping us from success, it's because in some schools, we have students that are acting in a manner in which is acceptable. Is it acceptable, to act a certain way? Well, again, we set the tone, we set the bar, we set the standard for what is acceptable and what isn't. It's very difficult when you see a school system like Chicago Public Schools that in their student code of conduct book, you can literally find this out. You could do the research and look this up, where it is acceptable without suspension. If you are a student, the first time you do this, you can punch a teacher in the face. You can punch another student in the face. And as long as that teacher or that student doesn't ask for medical treatment, and it is the first offense that this has happened, and doesn't press charges, then that student cannot be suspended. You're basically telling them it's okay to punch someone in the face as long as it's not enough to hurt them and they don't press charges against you. That is absolutely insane to me. Now, I'm not a component of suspend and get them out of here, but you have to eliminate some of these problems from the classroom. And that's why I get back to, why are these kids acting this way? Where are our parents that are disciplining? Why can't we call parents, and instead of getting yelled at as teachers a lot of the time, and I'm speaking for not just Chicago, I'm talking about the suburbs, I'm talking about your New Lenox, I'm talking about, your Orland Park areas, I'm talking about these problems with behavior exist across the board. They exist everywhere. Maybe not as much in certain locations, but they do exist. These kids will act in a certain way and it disrupts the entire environment. So is it fair to your child who's sitting next to that child that's acting a fool? making noises, throwing things, touching people, hitting people, smacking people. I mean, I've witnessed kids smack each other, call each other names, call each other inappropriate names, verbally say things to me personally, the threatening that's there amongst an everyday activity. And then because it's in certain areas, we accept because we set the bar where we accept it, because you can't really discipline a kid all day long, every day, and every kid in the same. So what do? Well, you set a sacrifice, you create a discipline, you let those kids know what this discipline is, and it is going to be consistently dealt with a consequence. And when you have consistency, you then hold accountability and you hold those kids accountable, which will also ultimately equal results, or what we call success. So again, sacrifice, discipline, consistency, accountability equals success. I have kids that will do this on a daily basis, and what are we going to do? We're going to redirect as teachers. We're going to burn ourselves out. We don't want to deal with it. We continue to do this over and over and over again, and what ends up happening? We get right back to, we're not teaching, we're now disciplining. This is the epidemic problem in the school system. And where does it start? Where did these kids learn the behavior to act that way? Why do they think it's acceptable? Are we part of the problem in the school system? Absolutely. We don't have systems in place to deal with behaviors. We have social workers that, deal with social problems, and then they send them right back. And then guess what? They go right back to doing. So realistically, this is a work in progress. But if we don't have a system in place with consequences and understanding, we're going to keep having these problems over and over again. And guess what? These kids are going to act a certain way. And since we're passing everybody on, guess what? We're still sitting here understanding that behavior is going to hinder the success of everyone else. It is an epidemic problem in the school system, and it starts at home with parents. It is students that need to be accountable for their own education. It is parents that need to be accountable for their children. It is teachers that need to be accountable for putting things in place in the classroom management. It is schools that are accountable for this concept of having consequences and making sure that we have disciplinary actions. It is districts that provide us with student code of conduct books that will tell us and support teachers and support the learning aspects of all the kids in the classroom. It is politicians that are not just trying to get votes, they're finding funding for these schools that are not literally taking the ability of what kids' behavior is and broadcasting it out there so that we look like schools are wrong. We're putting in laws in place in society that match what you're allowed to do in schools. Look at society and how you can act and get away with, and now look at schools. They match. The school system has always matched society. Open our eyes and understand where the problems come from. Everybody is a problem in this stakeholder, but it starts at home. So I'm going to say this to you, and I'm going to challenge parents to understand. Go out there. Take responsibility for your own. Really, really take ownership in checking with your child, checking with their behavior with their teachers, checking with how they act, and understanding to hold them accountable. Understanding that you are going to sacrifice whatever it is that you need to sacrifice all their extra things that your children want, to make them understand that they need to be disciplined, to make them understand that they need consistent effort in how they act in order to keep them accountable for their actions, so you can see results and change and you can see success. Hold them accountable. Hold your own children hold yourself accountable for being a parent, because that's where it's going to start. And support your teachers, because no way do they want to sit in a classroom and have to deal with, yes, they're human. They're going to act out too. Teachers make mistakes, but they got to deal with 30 of them sitting in there that are acting in this foolish way. Why is that acceptable? It's not. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. Small disciplines repeated with consistency every day lead to great achievements. It's a great quote. Talk about disciplines, talks about consistency. We talk about this concept of success. And then also this, success is no accident. It is hard work, perseverance, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you are doing or learning to do. Love what you are doing and learning to do. Isn't that called passion? Didn't we talk about passion before and how you have to be passionate about something? Well, let's condition ourselves to be passionate about what we're learning about, so that we do act in a different manner. I'm sorry if we're offended. Let's please keep an open mind to this. Understand that everybody in this podcast I talk about is accountable for some things in here, including myself as a parent, including myself as a teacher, including myself in the school system. Understand that we can do better and we need to do better. And we're doing wrong to our own children when we're not providing them with structure, with discipline, with the set the right way to act the right way, because they are not only ruining their own education with their behavior, they are ruining others' educations around them. If your child is not one of them, please don't take offense. Please check in on them, even if they are one of the good kids, that they're not getting jaded or they're getting affected by other students' behaviors. Have conversation, open up, be a good parent, and understand this. Hold your schools accountable. Talk to your principals. Why is my kid sitting in the classroom with kids that keep getting in trouble that are behavior problems? What are we going to do about this? Go to school boards and put the pressure on them. Change policy. Be better. I'm going to leave you with that. Have a great day. I'm sorry for the negative today, but I promise you we'll go positive right after this. We're going to talk a little bit about Father's Day coming up soon. So I'll be back shortly. Have a great day. I appreciate you all. Please make sure you go on there and you follow. I would really appreciate that. Subscribe, follow. If you are listening to this, I would love for you to go ahead and do that. Even if you're not listening every day, that would be an attribute to saying that maybe you still want to see this or hear this. And also, again, it helps the podcast for me to get some confidence in wanting to continue on and keep going. I love the idea of the feedback. Anyone that wants to leave feedback for me, thank you so much. I appreciate you. It can be negative. You can tell me I'm not the problem. I'm not the parent that caused the problem. And disagree with me. I'm great with it. I love the conversation. Please never hold back, but also support. Anytime we have support for one another, I love that. I appreciate you guys. I love you all. Have a good day.